Hey guys, welcome to the Dragon's Voice podcast. I am your host, Shirley Reese Deans, and we're on the 9th episode, and it's been an amazing adventure so far. And just to get you all up to date, if you haven't watched the Kevin Ratcliffe episode, which was episode 8, make sure you do now. I'll send in the link below on YouTube. But however, we're going to move on to bigger and better things, and I'm really glad and really fortunate to have on the show now to talk about Bangor 1876. It's none other than the club secretary, Dafydd Hughes. David, how's it going?
Very good, thanks. Yeah, looking forward to a new season. If we could just be told when it starts,
Yeah. Oh, do you know what? It's amazing. If we get the season started, wherever it goes, it's there, it's football, and I just can't wait. But hopefully, fingers crossed, if everything calms down, then we can get people at the gates, and get people going. So, I mean, without, the likes of Bangor, without the supporters for Bangor, for Barry, for Carnarvon, for all the other clubs, there is no football, and sometimes there is no club. But that's the whole point, isn't it, with Bangor 1876?
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Yeah, you're quite right. We obviously, we've called it Bangor 1876 because football started in Bangor in 1876, and we're very keen to sort of reflect the history and traditions of football throughout the ages. And, I was looking the other day, about 20 odd clubs have carried the name Bangor since then. But, I think we're probably, for better or for worse, the reason behind 1876 being formed was an element of people being dissatisfied with what was going on at Bangor City.
Yeah.
It came to a head about February last year, 2019. But to be honest with you, things have been going from bad to worse. It is ironic. Having said that, at one stage when the new owners came in terms of watching football, there were some good players there. I remember going on a European trip to Lyngby in Copenhagen, and we only lost 1-0. And that was a very professional, performance. I remember our last game in the Welsh Prem, at Bala Town, and the sort of goal we scored was fantastic. And we had a great coach called Kevin Nicholson at the time, who was really doing the business in terms of calling the shots. But it sort of these were times when there were inklings that something bad was coming coming along. And when we played that game in Bala, we'd already been kicked out basically of the Welsh Premier. We had been, I think there's always a debate in Bangor as to whether we should be in the English system or should we be in the sort of Welsh system. It harks back to the days when we were in the conference. But of course, and even before that, there's a long tradition of playing in the northwest of England. But what people don't remember is, the kind of, or don't realise is the costs of running a team. If you've got, you'd have to compete on a week by week basis with a team like Wrexham, which obviously has a bigger sort of population supporting it than we do. Those were the sort of days of old, I think. And we sort of settled down in the Welsh League and had some good times, good games, and particularly when the first, as it were, Barry, was kind of at its pinnacle. There were some fantastic games, and they really showed the way. Then, of course, we sort of went head to head with TNS, but we were okay. We did win the league, and we have won it 3 times, or Bangor did, and. We liked the European trips, and it was all going okay. Never sort of going to be serial championship winners, but a very, very faithful large band of supporters, and traditional supporters who'd been there from the days of the Cheshire League and all this kind of stuff. So some people might think we're arrogant, big time Charlies, but we do regard ourselves as a big club in the Welsh pyramid. And 1876 has taken on that tradition. What has happened, the disenfranchised fans decided in March of last year, right, we're going to sort of, we've had enough with what was going on in the club up the road. We're going to kind of form our own club, and we had a public meeting and so on. we didn't really know how it was going to go, because there had been when the previous owners came in, there had been a public meeting in the clubhouse, and certain people seemed to go with them, others didn't. And I must admit, there were a gang of us who are now in 1876, and sort of the board basically did go to see Bangor for some time, but we really fell out of love with going. Anyway, we did set up the club, and as it happens, 12 months ago to the 21st, or to the 19th of June. So in other words, this week, as I speak, is our first anniversary of being members of the FAW.
Yeah.
It all started sort of when we got into the FAW, and they told us, right, you're going to play in Tier 5, which is the Gwynedd League. Yeah. So, and we took that, and we enjoyed our time in the Gwynedd League.
So let's go back a minute then, because we got a lot to cover as well, and get some clarity going, because I know you explained a lot here, but for Bangor 1876, it is purely for pure football, pure traditional, get the supporters interested again, especially just keep football in Bangor. Before the so-called owners, aka the Vaughan family, came in and everything, what was Bangor like before that ownership, or sort of how can I say, before that running became a thing?
Yeah. We had the board who and it was we had the president, Gwyn Piers Owen, a very well respected man in Welsh football, ex Football League referee, as the president. And then we had a board, and we knew the board. There were guys we knew. They were local. Some of them were local businessmen. One thing we didn't have was any large businesses sort of running or kind of having people running the club, and that was a bit of a sort of a weakness. We also had a very strong supporters association, and the supporters association was there to raise money for the club and to put money into the club and so on. We actually, the big problem sort of that we had for many years was that our ground at Farrow Road up to 2011 was always being sort of seen, are we going to spend on to improve it, are we not? There were issues with sort of the tenancy at Farrow Road. Some developers got involved, and they took an interest to. It was a city centre site, and lo and behold, by now there's an Asda store on it, and we had to move away from Farrow Road. That in itself had quite a negative impact, because a lot of people said, "I'm not going to the new ground at Nantporth."
Was it a smack in the face? Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, exactly. And they just they didn't see that as our traditional home, and they felt, no, I'm not going there. There was an element of boycott then. And then we sort of running that facility, and it's still the case, it's a nice sort of modern facilities, kind of sprinklers coming out the pitch and all this kind of stuff, all that sort of, at the time, state-of-the-art stuff. But it costs a lot to run. And, the rental levels, between the rental levels and so on, you're well into 5 figures. You're sort of, you're talking almost a multiples of tens of thousands to run the club, and also the infrastructure that was there. There's also a 3G facility, which again hasn't been properly used, properly managed, and doesn't really have the throughput to actually keep it going and make it a profitable sort of enterprise. So all in all, things were sort of falling around our feet, really. The sort of then there was the whole issue when the club went for a license to, one season. It all came tumbling down, and there was a very critical auditor's report and so on. Yeah. So all the people who, kind of put faith in the system really lost faith in it. Yeah. And that was the beginning of the end, really.
And especially as well, because I think a lot of people as well, not just Bangor City fans, or Bangor fans, if you want to call them that, the big supporters group. But it's like a lot of Welsh football fans have always said, ever since Bangor moved out of Farrow Road into that new ground, that's when it just went, the magic went and it was going. But I really want to know now. I think we have to go into this moment because it was controversial then. It's still controversial to this day. And I want to know about your opinions about it. When the Vaughan family came in as so-called sponsors, and especially with the history they've had in football, and it's not very positive, it was all negative. I mean, the effects that it had on Barrow, Chester, and what possibly could have been to Wrexham if they would have gone to that consortium with Stephen Vaughan Sr. What was the initial response to the Vaughans coming in to Bangor City at that time? Was there a lot of, whoa, hang on a minute, we've got an enemy of football here. This is not a man who's positive, who's got a good history of football here.
It's interesting. There were mixed views, and certainly that sort of information was being fed to us by other clubs and other people saying, kind of watch out what you're letting yourself in for. But the one thing that the Supporters Association really felt left out from was the discussion. And it's interesting. I remember being in France 4 years ago over the Euros. And we were sort of, it was funny how everywhere the future of Bangor used to come up with all sorts of people. And it was really ironic, kind of that this whole thing was going on and rumours we were hearing things in France, or so-and-so's coming in with a consortium and so on. And of course, at the end, we ended up with the kind of the Vaughan family taking an interest. And to be honest with you, kind of, as I say, in the first season or so, there were people, they brought players in. Gary Taylor-Fletcher, for example, kind of was a very experienced forward. And then, a load of other sort of players, Gary Roberts, who is himself a bit controversial, but, with Chester, or he was last season anyway, but Gary, there were some really good guys in there, and I must say that some of the football that they played, I remember one, first game of the season, beating TNS 5-2 at home, and what more would you be asking for at the time? And this was, there's no doubt whatsoever that we had a very good team at the time, but unfortunately, as it transpires, we couldn't afford that team. And I think this is the whole thing. This is the ethos that we're trying to adopt in 1876 as a sustainable yet competitive football team. The sustainability, we've been helped very much with our new team because we've got a university at Bangor. They had a brand new football facility coming on stream when we were just setting up in July of last year. And to be quite honest, kind of, we couldn't have afforded or couldn't really have achieved what we have achieved had that not happened, because we could never have found a suitable ground, an alternative ground, and something which kind of enables us to remain as the heart of football in Bangor.
With that in mind, then, when did you? Because I remember when Barry first returned to the Welsh Premier League. I remember the first ever when I went to go and watch my very first Barry versus Bangor game, right? And I remember taking a Blackpool pennant with me, and every time Gary Taylor-Fletcher had the ball, we just kept shouting. And I'm just there with a Blackpool pennant going, Gary, sign it! Just getting notes. It was funny. It was tomfoolery, but little did we know at that time it was going to be the last season for Bangor, because it was the return for Barry, but it was going to be the last season for Bangor City for quite a while. Tell us what happened in that season, the ins and outs, and how did you feel when the news came out that, yep, we're gone, but we're out of the Welsh Prem, even though finishing second?
Well, yeah, exactly, and this is it. And the team was playing good football. We sort of knew the writing was on the wall, but of course it was. There was also, I remember the last game of the season at Bala, the one thing we noticed going to Bala, and we really enjoyed our trips to Bala, the excellent chip shop there, which we always used to frequent.
Oh, yeah.
There was a large police presence there, and we thought, wow, kind of, what's all this about? Kind of as if we were going to do, and the media were there, kind of both channels serving Wales, and kind of, let's be quite honest, they made a bit of a thing about it, that we were going to have that we were going to invade the pitch, and we were going to do this and we were going to do that. To be quite honest, we were there. We wanted to show that our heads were being held high, and there was quite a good away attendance, as there always was at Bala, and Bala did well out of us, but we didn't sort of just give in, and that, as you quite rightly say, we were runners up, but we'd already lost the license, kind of the license appeal and so on, so we were going nowhere, to be honest, and we were going, we said, okay, fine, we'd be going down, and we'd be visiting other clubs and so on and so forth, in the Welsh, in the kind of Cymru North, but there's no doubt whatsoever that we felt that we kind of should have been in the Welsh Prem. Kind of, there was, for example, also we were looking forward to an Iron Brew Cup tie up in Scotland, for example, which the sort of runners up had, and kind of, there's a lot of fun about it. You quite rightly say with football, the trips and the away trips and the trips to different places. We were fortunate enough, had quite a few European trips, but kind of that was a crack you got out of it all, and it's great supporting. You knew the people out there and knew the escapades that went on, but that all went, and we were very sad about that. And then kind of, it all got a bit messy in the sense that people were coming and going. We had a succession of managers over a few months, and quite honestly, the performance on the field, wasn't anything like good enough, and it was just, and the other thing is, I think the fans, certainly the Supporters Association, did feel alienated, and this is why, to an extent, the Supporters Association called 2 or 3 public meetings, i.e. for all the fans to vent their frustrations or otherwise. And, we've got to say there are some people, we still regard them as friends. They're still sort of on Facebook as friends and so on. And they still go to Nantport to watch the current Bangor City. Having said that, the fact that we, after yourselves in Barry and Carnarvon, have probably in the non-league sort of attendance charts are third. We got a higher average by 1 than TNS, and we attract hundreds of people to our home games in the 5th tier. So kind of, we've got about 750 odd people on our member database. So kind of, in the circles in which we sort of mix, we are quite a big club. Kind of, and we were very sad to see Rill sort of, kind of hit the buffers, but of course there's a new Rill now, so we would look forward to be playing them. But our aspiration, and it does sound, how can Bangor sort of sustain 2 teams? Well, kind of, we've also been very lucky in having a lot of good business sponsors, people who have looked after us and put, kind of advertising around the ground and so on. So we have been able to sort of sustain. We've got a good team. As you probably know, we had 100% record in our league, scored something like 115 odd goals and only 9 against. We had invested, because when we went for the membership of the FAW, let's be quite honest, we had planned a tier 3 sort of setup. That is the sort of play, the level of football we had hoped to be playing at. So we did sign players of the calibre who could sort of play at tier 3, and that remains to be, that's the immediate sort of target, is to get up to tier 3. But I think over the next 4 years or so, we do hope to move up, and we hope to be playing certainly kind of FAW North, i.e. the 2nd tier, in a matter of a couple of years. And who knows, kind of, then we'd have to consider where do we go next, because it's all about ground facilities. We've just had an inspection this week for tier 3, but kind of, once you start going into tier 2 and up for tier 1, obviously there's a lot of investment involved in both capital investment on facilities, but also on the team.
So just going back then, because there's a lot of really great information and a lot of great promising things are going ahead for Bangor 1876, and I seen the coverages, and I want to go mention about FC United, the Manchester friendly, and other things going on, but because it's brilliant. But one last question about the Vaughans before I stop mentioning them. But the thing about them is that every time I go into research about the so-called business people, and it was amazing how Stephen Vaughan Jr., he was a manager on 2 occasions for Bangor City FC and everything like that. What were they like? Have you ever been associated with them? Did you ever spoken to them? And what were they like as people before they got up and left Bangor?
To be honest, I think that was the big issue, was the lack of communication between certainly the Supporters Association. Now then, I'm sure that some supporters got to see them and got to talk to them, but I was involved with the Supporters Association. We did feel, because we did have shares in the club, and that was one of the matters of dispute that kind of, I think, and I think it's still a matter of dispute as to whether an issue of shares which was passed at an AGM was legal or not, and we questioned that, and we and as far as I'm aware, that AGM is still postponed. Remains postponed. So we've still, I'm not too certain if our Supporters Association is still existing, but we've still got those shares on the register at Bangor City, but we never had the kind of the interaction which we were used to having with the board. There was never any. It was always the sort of understanding they didn't really want our support in terms of financial support and so on. Whereas in the past we had been helping with certain issue, if there was something which needed a bit of, a few thousand put in, the Supporters Association would put it in. But they came in and said, no, it's okay, guys, we don't want you. And as far as we were concerned, it was a bit like a dictatorship that we didn't really have very much contact with them. There was a lot of wanting face-to-face sort of discussions, certainly offering face-to-face discussions, but not wanting to present documentation, which we'd asked for. We did ask for various issues, various items of documentation, as we were entitled to as shareholders. Never did get to see them, to be quite honest with you. And then, as for whatever reason, the ownership then passed over to Mr. Serafino, who is there at the present time.
Do you know what? It seems weird now, because I look at Bangor City now, and I look at the squads, and I look at the backroom staff and everything. It's mostly Italian or not Portuguese, Argentinian now, and I'm thinking, what the hell has happened to Bangor? What's going on with that club? But and it's like they got the World Cup winner. I forgot his name now. They had the World Cup.
I can't remember him. Yeah, I know the guy you mean.
Piscani or something like that.
Yeah, Piscani. Yeah, that's right.
But when you first, at the time, Bangor 1876 was up and running, and there was a lot of promises. But when you guys first heard that this Italian businessman who was in the music business, just came in, I don't know whether he put the money in or not, and he brought in this World Cup winner. What was your initial response when you saw like the changes to the squad, the changes to the team and everything? What was your initial response to everything that was happening at that time?
Do you know what? By that time, we were concentrating on our own club, and not really, because our feeling, my personal feeling, and I think a lot of people share it, was, kind of, all due respect to these guys, I've never seen them play, and as you quite rightly say, a lot of them were Italians. They were around the place, staying, kind of in hotels and so on, or over in Liverpool and training over there. There were a lot of questions as well. That's interesting. They're amateur players, and yet they seem to be full timers. Kind of, they were just people. Yeah, people were suspicious. But having said that, I must say, Mrs. Serafino seems to have paid some of the bills which were outstanding. And genuinely has been, I think, certainly publicly trying to ingratiate himself to the local community. Having said that, now I understand, as of sort of about a week ago, he's now the president of I think, third tier Italian team. And he's sort of, gone over to Italy. The Argentinian manager has been replaced by Colace, and he is now described as the technical secretary of Bangor. But our understanding is that he's gone over to Italy with Mr. Serafino. I'm not too certain. They've announced a couple of local, well, dare I say it, Welsh sort of based players in the last week as signings. So apparently they're trying to build up a more local squad, although I understand they could also be using some of the signings from last season. So it's a very sort of mixed. They're still going through the the PR sort of activity and so on. They recently, this last week, announced they're setting up a women's team. They're still kind of trying to get the FAW to give them an academy. So they're setting up a development centre, as in fact are we, and also we will have a women's team next season. So it'll be interesting to see what will happen in that local derby.
It's okay, no, it's not a problem. Yeah. Right, let's get down to it. Let's get down to the good times. So Bangor 1876. It's been formed by the supporters, including yourself and everyone involved. I want to know, how did you get that friendly with FC United of Manchester, and even before then, how did it all start to come to fruition as well?
Yeah, it is interesting. I think kind of a lot of credit goes to a guy called Kevin Owen, who did a lot of the donkey work in setting the whole thing up. I'm not really certain that we do have one of our members, one of our board members, is a keen sort of member also of FC United, because I think FC United is the sort of holy grail of supporter-owned clubs.
Yeah.
And certainly one of their when we had public meetings, we did a lot with Supporters Direct. And I'm trying to think, they've got a new sort of name now, they merged and so on, but we had a lot of support, and we had the guy who set up FC United come to talk to a public meeting. So Andy was giving us all the sort of background and giving the supporters the information about how things are set up in FC United. And all of a sudden, I think we were on our buses on the way to play the friendly, because I think they wanted, and it says a lot for them, that we were the new kids on the block, but they wanted to be our first sort of, if you like, competitive, even though it was a friendly, obviously, but our first proper game, they wanted it to be against them. And we went to Broaders Park and were entertained regally. And I think we took a few hundred with us, because I think people saw it as a very prestigious friendly. What it did prove, though, was, and we did lose it 12-1, as you probably know.
Yeah.
But what it did prove, we saw we'd had friendlies, so we saw interesting. We're having these were sort of, I say we didn't have any friends, but we saw the interest was building up for the Manchester one. And when we saw who turned up on the day, they were very familiar faces, some faces we hadn't seen for some time. So that showed us that we were on the right track. Kind of, it could have been a complete flop. That 12-1 could have sunk us. What it did, I think, for the morale of the players, because we went then 3 or 4 days later to play Chester away, and Chester had about 6 first-team players in the team on the day, and we only lost 2-1. And quite honestly, the guys we've got, and some of these guys, there's 1 or 2 who were 16 years old. Our top scorers just past 18, Dylan Summers-Jones, and kind of the guy has got a brilliant future ahead of him. But these guys were really, it was men against boys. Let's be quite honest.
Yeah.
You know, the FC United guys. And I'm not too, I'm glad somehow that we did. Certainly the experience is good. In fact, had we not had the COVID, we are still in correspondence with them about them coming over to Bangor for a pre-season friendly. But I don't know now whether our seasons will allow us to do that. But we do, as it were, we do owe them. And I think, you know, like every club, they like trips away in the same way as we're hoping to get a couple of games, you know, where the supporters can have a bit of a day out, you know.
You know, it's brilliant because of the Bangor supporters as well. And I'll get on to them in a minute, because when you mentioned players, two that sticks out in my mind, and it's Michael Johnston and Les Davis, and they came from the original Bangor City, and they came over to your Bangor, or the supporters Bangor, if you know what I mean. But what was it like to see those two just go, you know what, I don't want to play, I want to play for you guys, because I know it. Did it mean a lot for the likes of Les and Michael just to come in and just play for the team?
Yeah, what is interesting, we got although he probably won't want me to say it, but we got a charismatic manager in Mel Jones, and Mel has been around the houses for a few years. He's been involved. He did, you know, have short spells as caretaker manager in Bangor City, but has been very, very instrumental. He's been working in the Wrexham Academy. He's been working in the Bangor Academy, and was the mainstay of the Bangor Academy. Now, then Mel himself has got a lot of contacts. When we he went out evangelizing, and, you know, kind of told these guys, this is what we're setting up. There was talk at the time that Les was talking to Aberystwyth. And to be honest, we decided, a bit like having a spine in your team, certainly those two. And then we also had Jamie Petrie from, you know, so the three amigos sort of came together, and we actually built our team around those guys. And it's a mix of experience and youth. But those guys are really, and their commitment is amazing. They've brought the young guys along with them, and whenever you sort of do interviews on the website and stuff, the young guys are saying, well, you know, with Les and with Jono, so, you know, one with the forwards, the one at the back, and then Jamie Petrie is also a fantastic player. We built it around those guys, and it was a deliberate ploy. So those were the number one and number two on the list, or probably equally number one. Once we got them in, they could then sort of influence. And you know, I think John will admit that sometimes he plays when he shouldn't be, but this is typical of the guy. He's fantastic. He's always, you know, kind of, the mouth is always going. We got a fantastic young prospect in Kian Williams, who plays by his side, and you know, kind of, he just coaches. And I think that's the other thing about the guys. What we hope to do is to facilitate them developing as coaches. So we have said to them, well, you know, we want to see you staying here, obviously, but also if you want to go for your badges, we will support you in going for the badges, you know?
Yeah. With that in mind, let's get down to the season in the what was it, the Gwynedd League, or I don't know what they're calling it now. There's so many names. I was thinking, is it that league? Is it that league? I don't know what's going on. So when you went into the Gwynedd League, did you honestly think that straight away, boom, top of the league, gonna finish as champions, or did you think, no, let's take it one step at a time? You know,
I think, let's be quite honest. We privately, and kept it to ourselves, did expect to win the Gwynedd League, because, as I said earlier, we had actually signed on and assembled a team which we felt was could be competing in Tier 3. And, you know, that showed when we beat a few Tier 3 and Tier 4 teams in cups and so on. So there was no doubt whatsoever that once we started playing, our very first game, we won 4-1 away, and there was the one thing you showed is some of these clubs had never seen a crowd before, let's be quite honest. And we were taking, you know, we took about 400, I think it was 440 was the attendance in our first match. You know, these clubs have been telling us, it's great to see you here because you're keeping us going for the season. in terms of people buying stuff. We've got a very simple philosophy. We tell guys, right, go to local pubs, go to sort of put some money into the clubs we visit, because let's be quite honest, you're only paying a quid or two to go into these grounds. So you know, kind of, we do go for a few drinks beforehand, either to a clubhouse if there is one, or to a local pub. And you know, we like to support any sort of community-based sort of enterprise. We'll support them. So I know that I went to a few or a couple of sort of league meetings beforehand, and we were criticised because we actually did sign Les and Mike Johnson, Jono, on professional terms. So by doing that, we actually made the fifth tier a professional league. So there was a transfer window and all this kind of stuff in it, which had never been heard about in that tier before. So we were very unpopular about that. And there's no doubt I had a bit of stick in these meetings where you go to the sort of league and all the clubs are there. And, you know, they did have a go. And I think there were people thinking, you know, these are big time Charlies. We were going, we were throwing a boulder into a pond, and the ripples were like waves, and that's the effect that we had. And I think, you know, kind of, people were quite glad to see us sort of passing through. Having said that, we were very lucky, and we sympathise greatly that there are clubs, fantastic clubs, you know, kind of Nevin, Chadder Bay, Menabridge Tigers, who have, you know, kind of, we had some great sort of games against them, and they weren't, you know, we didn't roll over every single team, but there's no doubt whatsoever that we did put double figures past quite a few of the teams. And that's why, as I say, we scored about 115 goals, I think, and 9 against. And you know, it's testimony to the gap in standard between ourselves and the teams in the same league.
So when you became champions, of course, now you go up one stage, which would be what would be now in that
well to be quite honest, there hasn't been a formal decision. Yes, we're champions. There's no formal decision as yet that there will be promotion, relegation, and so on. Although the complicating factor is below, from tier 3 downwards, the FAW, you know, kind of, they announced, was it 2 years ago, that they were going to reorganise the leagues. So from next season onwards, the third tier will now be an FAW league, whereas presently is run by the you know, local associations, in our case the North Wales Coast FA. So from that point of view, there's going to be a complete reorganisation. Gwynedd League is going out of existence, and a lot of these smaller leagues are going out of existence. I must say that there's generally there's a lot of confusion out there as to what's going to happen. So we don't really know where we'll be next season. We hope that that we are entitled to be in the 4th tier, but we've also, possibly rather cheekily, put in a bid to go into the 3rd tier. Because and you know, we had an inspection, as I say, last week, but so did, I guess, you know, kind of quite a few other clubs. But this is quite controversial because there are some very good clubs in our area, for example, Llanberis and Llanrug, who have been told, "Oh, sorry guys, your ground isn't good enough." They don't are not able to expand, for example, the playing area because of constraints on their sort of ownership or their lease or whatever, and they might well find themselves relegated because on the basis of ground criteria as opposed to playing standard. So there's a lot of confusion. There's the first instance body will be sort of pronouncing on the 25th of June. I can then see quite a few people will appeal. And the appeal process will go ahead, and then the actual, the big decision's got to be made. I think it's the 10th of July, when the FAW board will sort of decide one way or the other how the whole thing is going to tumble down, as it were, you know. Yeah. So there's a lot of confusion, and below the tier 2, i.e. the Cymru North and Cymru South situation, as to where people are going to be playing.
So, a couple of last questions now before we conclude this podcast. It's been a brilliant one as well. Fair play. You know, I'm learning a lot now from you to hear that it's all looking positive now for Bangor City, for Bangor 1876. Sorry, I need to. This is why it's a good rolling progress here. But it's brilliant for 1876 because now, it's a positive future. The future's looking bright. I know at this moment in time, you don't know where you're going, but it's just one step at a time. Take it gradually now. And, let's just go for it and do the best we can, especially in football terms. But let's go back and talk about some good memories here for you, especially, would you say before 1876, what would you say is the best game ever that you've seen as a Bangor City supporter or a Bangor supporter?
Well, do you know what? It's probably going back when I was a very, very small kid, and I'm an old man, really. It was probably the win against Napoli, the 2-0 way back in 1962.
I was gonna say something, but I didn't want to insult you or anything like that.
No. So kind of. I'm that old, so I've seen quite a few sort of Welsh Cup finals and stuff like that. I remember another game when we went to Chester to see Bangor against Wrexham in the semi-final of the Welsh Cup, and we won 3-1. I've seen Cardiff City play quite a few times at Bangor, and there was one quite bizarre. I don't know if it was one of the best games, but we played a team called New Brighton from near Liverpool, and we actually, we're losing 6-2 in the FA Cup, and we came back to draw it 6-6. And then we went away and actually won. I can't remember. I think it was 1-0 or 2-1, and went through. So there have been also some memorable games like that. Going to Wembley to the to the FA Trophy final, drawing 1-1 with Northwich, and we felt a bit hard done by having to go to Stoke. It's a bit like Cardiff. You playing us in Cardiff, as it were, and as a neutral ground. So, but we we've had our ups and downs, but the games in the English system, you were playing against good teams. We were the last team that Wigan Athletic played in the non-league system before going to the league, and you look at where they've been, they've been in the Premier League, they've been in the League Cup final and so on, and we were rubbing shoulders with those guys on a regular basis,
Right, and the final question for you then, Dafydd, before we conclude this brilliant podcast, to you, in a couple of sentences or in whatever way you can express your love for Bangor. What does Bangor mean to you, whether it's Bangor 1876, or it's Bangor City, just football in general, Bangor football in general, what does it mean to you?
Well, I'm an adopted son in a sense, but I've been supporting them, as I say, since '62. So that's a hell of a long time. It's everything to me in terms of, I'm so involved at the moment with this. It's like a full-time job. So it's something you put your heart into, and I'm only one of about probably, in terms of our support, we've got about 30 odd people who are working very, very hard, and then we've got the wider fan base all over the world who really think about it, and it's amazing the memories and the stuff that comes back, and people are really proud of being associated with Bangor, and as we say, keep the faith.
Keep the faith, especially. Yeah. But anyway, Dafydd, thank you for coming on the Dragon's Voice podcast to talk about Bangor 1876, and especially the ins and outs and what's been happening. It's been a very interesting story, and a couple of trivia facts just to hear from you, Dafydd. I really appreciate it as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thanks for inviting me.
No worries. So, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to the Dragon's Voice podcast. The next episode, it will be very weird because it's going to be audio this time, a proper audio podcast, because the next guest, I won't say who, we having troubles with Zoom and Skype, so it's going to be proper audio. So, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to the Dragon's Voice podcast. I've been your host, truly, Reece Deans, and I'll see you all very soon. Take care.